The man.
Dr. Shoer, it is so good to have you back with us. You're live. You look fabulous.
Well, John, thank you very much. My movie star good looks are hard to miss, aren't they?
They really are. I mean, you're a very it's that gray sweatshirt that really is the thing I can see. You're definitely dressed for radio. So is Colonel Mike, who's I don't know what he's got on, some kind of a shirt that he had. It
says the man from Uncle, sir.
The man from Uncle. That's right. That's your Navy shirt. I'm in a suit and tie, so I stick out here like a sore thumb with these guys. Now, look, you guys have been all over the world. We just had Congressman Forbes on our show. By the way, let me mention to our audience that we have Colonel Mike and Colonel Shoer, Dr. with us for an hour today. Dr.
Save
Shoer,
me a cigar. I introduced Mike's blog in the last hour. He has a new piece up there speaking about General Petraeus and the neocon gang, and Mike can expand on it. But, going back to Forbes, if I can just grab the first minute, I like Randy Forbes. I like his accent. I like his charisma. I like that he's for national defense. But like Michael said, could we do like more troops? Because we're doing ground wars. I don't know what more ships are going to do. And John, this advertisement, the Navy, a force for good, going around painting houses, chasing terrorists from the southern Philippines by painting houses or doing cleft lips, and going to Thailand and building another hut in southern Thailand. Somehow the insurgents. I've been around the world. Congressman, I like you a lot, and I'm an ex-Navy guy. I love ships, but guess what? When you park our ships right outside of Russia's border, and you have jets flying over, and you're saying, well, we're being threatened. It's like Putin having ships off of Norfolk. How would you react to that? Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I don't think we want the American Navy to be loved. We want it to be respected and feared. If it was respected and feared, you'd need less ships because people would not want to take you on very, very often. And again, it's just counterintuitive to me, and I have don't mean any disrespect for the congressman.
No whatsoever.
These governments, whether they're Republican or Democrat, get us into land wars. You can't get a frigate into Anbar province unless you put it on a truck, I guess, if there's such a truck that could do it. But it makes sense to me, if you're going to keep fighting these useless wars, that you make sure the Marines and the Army have all the troops they can muster. It's kind of a nightmare, really, because they're fighting wars that shouldn't be fought. They don't have enough men to fight wars that should not be fought, and so a lot of them die for nothing. And it's just an endless circle of nonsense. But to think that our national defense is going to be better because we have another 120 ships painted with sailors being designated to paint houses, I think that's a little bit of unrealism.
Well, Dr. Shoer, look, that was the question I was trying to get to. But look, I asked the congressman this question, and he's saying, look, we have 237 ships. We need 350. And I guess my question that I really can't get a straight answer from anybody is, why is 350 the magic number? Why isn't it 260 or 1,000? I mean, what does 350 do?
Well, I don't know why the number is magic, John, but what does the United States Navy have to do? I think it has to fight in times of war, and we have to have enough ships to do that. It needs to make sure that American commerce flows over the freedom of the seas, as they call it. Other than that, there's not very many missions. Certainly, making themselves loved is probably should be mission number 7,406.
Right.
I don't know how they arrive at the Navy. There is, and the congressman was very honest about it. The expansion of the Navy is also very good for his congressional district and the party in Virginia because so many jobs are tied to it. But again, all that said, I don't know how they get to the magic number.
Well, John and Mike, let me just add this. I have a nephew who's a recruiter with the U.S. Navy now, and I think the bigger issue is the political correctness. The political correctness of the people on the ships now who are leaving. They don't want to do 10 or 20 years because they're being forced with all kinds of political correctness, and you know what I'm talking about. And the political correctness that has struck all our military branches. A friend of mine just sent me a text. I want to read it on the air if you don't mind.
Sure, go ahead.
It says, we give money to Iran, then we arm the Saudis, and then we expect the American boys to die protecting them. Mike speaks about that all the time, right, Mike?
Yeah, our kids die for absolutely nothing. It seems the American people are behind the curve on this. We have lost, since 9/11, probably 6,000 to 7,000 dead and probably 4 times that many wounded, many of them maimed, no arms, no legs. And yet we're further behind the curve than we've ever been before. Why? Because the governments we elect don't mind seeing our kids killed and maimed, but they're surgically careful about making sure the enemy doesn't get killed to any great extent, because the enemy is mixed in with the local population.
You look at the bombing forays we've got now against ISIS. I mean, I've never seen anything like this. It's like there's so many things that they cannot bomb. And so if there's a potential civilian on a truck, or it's by a civilian where people could be populated, we let the armaments go right by. We let ISIS go right by because we're concerned about a civilian being maimed. But, meantime, we have no concern about our own kids going out there.
None at all. And if you look at the maps that are on the internet, Obama has deployed these special forces in more places than George Bush ever did.
Right.
They're everywhere. And they're not accomplishing much. They're brave people. They're skilled people. But instead of, in 1996, when this war started, we faced hundreds of them who were hiding in caves. In 2016, we're facing several tens of thousands of them who hold territory, live in the open, and govern people on 4 continents. What's wrong with Americans? We're not only not winning, we're desperately losing. And I think it's an unnecessary war to start with, John.
I got to tell you, Dr. Scheuer, because you're right. When we started this war, when it first started with Afghanistan, remember the George Bush administration was looking at making some big bombed mountain. Remember that? I forget the name of it, but it was some big...
It was a blue something,
It was
wasn't
a blue
it?
something, and
Yeah.
you put it in a mountain. And you're right, you had a couple thousand people living in caves who at night would come out and try to sniper somebody. Now, and that was what? That was 2001.
15 years, yeah.
Yeah. So now, 15 years later, they govern people, have territories, have oil, have a whole...
They
economy
barter in
They
oil and
barter
body
things.
parts. And
They're
body
bartering-
parts.
Right. And so we've gone backwards. All these men and women, maimed, dead, all trillions of dollars we've spent, we got nothing out of it.
We've nothing
and
out
they're
of it.
still doing it. And the final thing I want to say, I got what Randy Forbes is doing with the Sea Power bill. I'm all about jobs. I get the jobs in Newport News and Newport News Shipbuilding. I get all that, and I respect that. But there's something fundamentally wrong with basing an economy on building up armaments. I mean, this to me doesn't make any sense. It's like if we could just build more ships to send more of our young men and women overseas in harm's way in order to, I don't know, open up dental clinics or something, whatever they're trying to do, we can build ships and give people jobs. I mean, I'm not sure this is sustainable.
No.
Am I right?
It's almost like a social welfare project in the way it's been
Thank you.
described. It's a make work project for ships that we probably don't need, and wars we certainly don't need to fight. John, if you looked at the last 2 years, America has probably lost fighting in those wars 12 men and women, maybe 20. And if our borders were closed and our immigration policy enforced, the Islamists would have absolutely no ability to attack us in the United States because they couldn't get in. Mm-hmm. The 14 people or 17 people who died in San Bernardino were killed by Obama and his State Department. Mm-hmm. Same thing with Fort Hood. Obama and his political correctness killed those people there because no one would report Major whatever his name was. It's an extraordinary thing there for the American people not to say enough. What are we going to do? Europe is in the midst of destroying itself. Are we going to go there when it becomes an insurgency in Europe to fight?
That's exactly where we're headed. And the fact that a lot of these problems are Europe's problems. They won't deal with it. Everybody's looking at us. If ISIS is the global problem, we talk about it. Where's Russia, right? Why aren't they involved? Why don't we let them go in? Where's China? It's all on our shoulders again. And it's our young men and women. And then what bothers me is we've got congressmen saying, well, we need ships and tanks so that we can get jobs.
Yeah.
And I get the argument, but deep down, it doesn't sit well with me.
John, you said we need ships and tanks.
Ships and tanks.
Ships and tanks. And then we need another 60,000 H-1B visas so Intel can lay off 12,000 people for jobs, and we'll get some foreign workers in. See, they'll give you the H-1B, and we need ships and tanks. But we want to create the jobs for the H-1B market, the tech jobs and so on and so forth.
John, that's entirely correct. The founders really didn't give a darn about whether anyone else on Earth voted, whether there was some kind of oppression overseas. What they were concerned about was conserving and making sure that our civil liberties were never constricted, that our economy worked, and that we were able to defend ourselves. Now, when you look across the governing elite, political or Republicans and Democrats, the media, they somehow find their self-worth in talking about if America doesn't do it, it won't get done. It's our mission to spread women's rights and democracy around the world. We wouldn't be Americans if we didn't intervene on behalf of, take your pick of any kind of country you want. What that is arrogance or the simple lack of sense of self-worth. An American politician should be concerned with America. And if the Europeans want to cause themselves an internal civil war that destroys their civilization in the European Union, well, tough luck for them.
That's got nothing to do with us.
Nothing.
In my judgment. It's not in our strategic interest. Look, they've been fighting over there since the beginning of time. They're going to keep fighting, and it's their problem. And look, Merkel's going to get voted out of office when her term comes up. The Germans aren't paying their fair share with NATO. I mean, Trump pointed that out the other day. We get caught holding the bag with all this stuff.
John, I think NATO is even more important than the money. They don't fight. When NATO goes to war, the Brits fight, the Canadians fight, and we fight. The Danes and the Germans sit in their camp, train cops, and drink beer. I've heard that some of the Poles are very good fighters when they go overseas with us, and some of the other East Europeans, but the rest of them are feckless. They have got soldiers with hair that they have to wear nets in order to get their helmet on. It's just a useless organization, and we have now for 60, 70 years pampered and allowed them to become effete. Kind of amorphous people who expect the Americans to come to their rescue at all times. And I think they need to grow up. And we need to grow up. We need to grow up in the sense of saying, America is our job. We're in North America, see, and on each side of us we have 3,000 miles of ocean. If we close our borders, we'll be just fine because we want to trade with the world. We want to be on good terms with everyone. But we certainly don't want to get involved in your wars.
Well, Mike, Milton Friedman, who you all know, said something a long time ago that was very, very on target and introspective. And he said, if you want to be a welfare state, that's fine. We can probably survive. If you want to have open borders, that's fine. You can probably survive. But the two of them are mutually exclusive. If you want to have a welfare state and you want to have open borders, your country is going to collapse. You're not going to have a country because it'll collapse from within. And that's basically what we're seeing now. As Mike said, we're talking about building these ships and jobs and Newport News shipbuilding. And Colonel Mike pointed out there's an article today in USA Today, 12,000 Intel jobs gone and replaced with foreign workers. I mean, the whole thing is absurd, gentlemen, beyond the pale.
Beyond the pale. And I think we all, the short answer to all of this, John, is from a guy who used to fly airplanes called Lindbergh. And he always thought that the concise definition of American foreign policy and American policy generally is America first.
America first. That's our...
Sounds like Donald Trump.
Let's get to Petraeus.
Michael's going to talk about Petraeus.
You did a column on Petraeus that came out last night. Dr. Scheuer, that I thought was fascinating. And you're right. I mean, we do tend in this country to lionize losers. I mean, he did lose 2 wars. He became the CIA, the head of the CIA, and now he's firmly joined the neoconservative camp, and another guy calling for more wars. What's going on?
John, if I could figure that out, we'd probably be all safer. But what I know is they have adopted it almost like a religion, that it's our job to intervene in other people's affairs until they start to fight us, and then we have to fight the war. Petraeus wrote an article where he said, I'm a man of big ideas, and he outlined 5 ideas that should govern what we've done. Well, I was there when bin Laden declared war in 1996, and our response to him was exactly in 1996 what Petraeus wrote in April 2016. So 20 years later, as we were talking about earlier, we're endlessly behind, impossibly behind. The enemy is bigger, larger, wealthier, better armed, more barbarous. Why? In the whole column, Petraeus never said anything about any other option. The only option is endless, expensive war. He never said, well, why are we fighting this war? And the reason we're fighting it is because of the politicians and the ruling class and the media. Somehow we have to be involved in everything, everywhere, even at the expense of our own country's infrastructure, economy, debt, children. And it doesn't make sense. And Petraeus really, it was a petition to get back in with the ruling class or the governing elite after his exile for whatever he was doing with ladies and secrets. And I just said, enough of this. We don't have a general who's won anything since 1945. That beautiful morning when the Japanese finally surrendered in September 1945, we had all kinds of winners. We haven't had one since. We have generals who are complete strangers to victory, not only the fact of victory or seeking victory, but the word victory. The only thing they're very good at is saying, oh, there's no military solution. Well, John, there is always a military solution. But if you are so politically correct that you will not kill the enemy who intends to kill you, then you're throwing the country away. And these generals, who we used to look up to as thinking that they had 2 missions: first, to defeat the enemy; second, to bring back as many of our kids as they could, do neither. They stay in their grades, they stay with their stars, and fight wars for presidents who they obviously know, unless West Point is turned into a girls' school, that they don't intend to win. They never intend to win these wars they start. The war shouldn't be started, but by God, if you start it, you better finish it, or the enemy's just going to keep coming at you. And so I thought, when I read Petraeus' piece, I thought, enough is enough. I grew up with a dad who was a Marine in World War II. He was at Iwo Jima. I was trained to be respectful of the military. And the military has been kind of the last institution that I had respect for. And at least in terms of the General Officer Corps, I don't know how we can respect any of them anymore. They've taken our kids to wars that they know no one wants to win, gotten them blown up and maimed, and they've claimed they've had success. Petraeus is the greatest example, but McChrystal and the rest of them. I don't think one of them stood up and said, Mr. President, unless you kill these people, we're going to lose, and we're going to get our kids killed for nothing. And I think that's what we need. Have one of them resign, John, and say to the American people just exactly that.
Well, the only reason McChrystal resigned is because he said disparaging things about Obama. And so based on the laws that we have, he had to resign. But none of them resigned because they failed.
No.
I mean, you're so spot on, Dr. Scheuer. And look, this is tough with our environment. And, I'm a Republican. And I'm probably one of 3 Republicans in the United States that was opposed to the National American Free Trade Agreement, myself, Pat Buchanan, and Trump. That's it. And I was probably one of the only Republicans in the United States that opposed all these wars. It's tough being a Republican and opposing these wars. I was opposed to Iraq 1, Iraq 2, Kuwait. I couldn't even stand, like, why did we go into Kuwait? Let them fight for themselves. We had no treaty with them. I mean, the whole thing is asinine. It sucked us in there. But look, we went into Afghanistan. Did we win? No. We went into Iraq 2 times. We failed both times. I mean, you look at the situation now, and it seems like whatever we get involved in, things are worse off, but we keep doing it. Why?
It's John, I don't know. I'm not a philosopher, but I think the more people turn away from religion, the more they need a religion. And Obama and a lot of the Republicans have turned away from Christianity or towards secularism, but they still need something to believe in.
Global warming. Yeah, global warming. It's the new religion.
What they believe in, free trade has become a religion.
Yeah, it's a free.
Intervention has become a religion. Installing women's rights in Afghanistan is a religious cause for these people. And they don't care who dies or how much money is spent. They're pursuing their own little individual gods. And I think it is extraordinary that the American people put up with this. Why American people are ever encourage their children to join the military anymore is unbelievable to me, because there's no general out there that I'm aware of that's going to take care of his troops or resign from his office and say to the American people, once he's out of the military, those people don't want to win wars. Why are you sending your people, your sons and daughters to us? I'm not going to take them to wars we don't intend to win. But how we get from where we are today, which is a celebration of waste and loss in terms of foreign policy and war, to a place of responsibility, I don't know how we get there.
Well, Dr. Scheuer, I want to get to specifically some of your comments about General Petraeus, and I know this is a little controversial on our show because many people regard General Petraeus as
walking on water.
Walking on water. Share with our audience when you say, look, he lost 2 wars, and now he's calling for further engagement of the U.S. in the Middle East, which is what your column was on. By the way, you can read that. Go to non-intervention.com. Share with our audience why, in your view, Petraeus was a failed general.
Well, John, we went to Iraq unnecessarily. But once we were there, we had to win, because that country had to be controlled. Petraeus staged this farce called the Surge. And now McCain and Senator Graham and Ted Cruz say, oh, the Surge brought us victory, and only because Obama withdrew did it fall apart. Well, what the Surge did, John, the people, he said, we supported the people who liked us and who were going to fight al-Qaeda. Well, yes, the people we supported wanted to drive out al-Qaeda or kill them because of the way al-Qaeda was behaving. Petraeus commanded this surge, and it was designed to give guns and give training to Sunnis who would fight al-Qaeda. Well, the Sunnis hated us, but they wanted to get rid of al-Qaeda first. Second, they knew that we were ethnically cleansing or allowing Baghdad to be ethnically cleansed of Sunnis, and that there was going to be a Sunni-Shia civil war. And any training in guns they got from us were going to help them defend themselves. The other thing about the surge is that they never bothered to close the borders with Syria and Jordan. So they could never annihilate the enemy. All they did was drive most of them into Syria and Jordan. And look at what happened in Syria now. Petraeus, by this nonsensical way of fighting wars, and backed up by Bush and by Obama, it's not all his fault. But what they did was allow Iraq to become what it is today, which is an easy transit point for the terrorists or insurgents, whatever you want to call them, to move from Afghanistan and South Asia through Iraq into Syria, Jordan, Egypt, and all of North Africa. And he talks as if he's a stellar success. He was a stellar failure in a constellation of failures. Republican, Democrat, Pentagon, all. And why? Correct. There was a Confederate cavalryman, Nathan Bedford Forrest. He said, war is about fighting and fighting is about killing. And the idea of war is to annihilate the enemy until he does not want to play or there's none of him left to play. And they've got our kids killed, our debt run up. We're more hated in the world than we've ever been before for lost wars. It makes no sense.
So let's get to Petraeus and the surge, and I see what you're saying, absolutely. At the time this was going on, Dr. Scheuer, you were a senior analyst in the Central Intelligence Agency, so you were right there in the middle of it. You were at the bin Laden desk, so you were one of the go-to people. I assume you were sending up information that was counter to what they wanted to hear. How did they react to that?
They ignored it. The Iraq war was hived off from the people that were dealing with al-Qaeda and the terrorists because they wanted to deal with it as if the two weren't connected. The people who were dealing with the Islamists said, listen, we're not Iraq experts, but if Saddam goes, you're opening a freeway from Kabul, Afghanistan, and Islamabad, Pakistan, all the way to Cairo and beyond, because Saddam is our best ally against these people. And that was delivered certainly to at least the director of Central Intelligence, George Tenet at the time. Whether he told his buddy the president or not, I don't know. But, John, the really sad thing is it's obvious. It's not rocket science. Saddam is the cork in the neck of the bottle. And that's what the people who were following terrorists were saying. You've got two separate bunches of terrorists. You've got the really hardcore in South Asia, and you've got in a kind of a lesser amount in North Africa because there's tyrants in power and they're going to smash them down. But Saddam is the key. Once you get rid of Saddam, the cork's out of the bottle and they're all one group. And that's what happened. And I also think, John, there was something about the surge that helped both Obama and McCain by getting the or was it Bush and the other guy? But it got the Iraq war off of the talking points of the daily election.
Right, because remember before the surge, we were talking about how we were losing.
Yeah.
Every day there was somebody else blown up, and what the death toll was. Remember they had death toll watch.
Yeah.
And every day it was on TV how many people had died, and Americans were getting the feel they were losing. So it seems like what you're saying, that some of the analysis that went behind the surge was for political
reasons. It got. I think it was McCain and Obama.
And I tell you, what our segments today, you're telling us that part of at least some of the enthusiasm for the surge was based on political gain.
Absolutely.
We talked earlier about building ships and tanks to get people jobs in Newport News, which I want jobs in Newport News. But, you've got the military-industrial complex and these wars now driving politics, the economy, and our kids are dying.
That's right. And you've got the fanatics like Hillary Clinton and her group. They wanted to install women's rights in Iraq and in Afghanistan. They wanted to write their constitution so a certain number of seats would have to be saved for women. So you not only have the business people, the politicians, but you have the fanatics who are driving this. Our kids, can you imagine one Marine dying so Mrs. Mohammed can vote?
It's unbelievable. I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, this country is circling the drain. You better wake up. You better stop this nonsense, because we're in the grips of the power elite, and we got to be able to stop it, or there's not going to be an America for our children. This is the John Fredericks Radio Network. We want to thank Dr. Michael Scheuer for being with us today at American College for Commerce and Technology. Colonel Mike.